Testimony concluded yesterday in a lawsuit challenging Arkansas's SAFE Act. The bill passed in 2021 to prevent doctors from performing experimental transgender surgeries on children. Arkansas' SAFE Act is the first of its kind in the nation, and it has led other state legislators to consider similar bills. Enforcement of the law has been on hold pending the results of this legal challenge from the ACLU. Joining me now from Arkansas is reporter Janice Hisle. She provided stellar coverage from the courtroom throughout this trial for the Epoch Times. Janice, welcome to Washington Watch.
Thank you so much for having me and for the wonderful compliment.
No, we are glad to have you. This is it's an underrated issue, but this issue continues to capture the nation's attention. And I think this case there in Arkansas, where the courts are considering the legality of this law for the first time, is an important one. You were in the courtroom, you monitored this. What were your impressions?
Well, one of the biggest issues about this case is that there's so much emotion tied up in it, but yet there's a lot of science to argue as well. And so it's kind of like science and emotion all wrapped together, which is kind of a really difficult mix.
And tell us about those stories, because what's the scientific argument at play? Now, the ACLU brought this lawsuit. What was the basis of their legal argument? Was it science or was it emotion?
Well, again, it's kind of all wrapped together. However, they did have experts who were testifying about the science, different people, lay people, for example, transgender identifying children and their parents were testifying about the emotional aspect of it. The science part of it, the crux of it is that the ACLU's experts are saying, look, these children are suffering, and the suffering is alleviated, they say, when these procedures are allowed. When these children who say that, for example, I'm a girl, but I think I'm a boy, that they are allowed to undergo these hormone procedures such as puberty blocking hormones, cross-sex hormones, and then ultimately surgery to, for example, remove breasts that they don't feel, reflects who they are. They think that's, they want it to look more masculine because they're a girl, and they say they want to look masculine. And so those experts are testifying that, here are studies that show that after a certain period of time, the children or minors who undergo these procedures say that they are happier. Now, the criticism of those studies is that they don't seem to follow the subjects very long. And also some of the way that the subjects are selected, the research design is viewed as being, quote, very low quality or low quality research. The other side disputes that show that these distressed teens are feeling better about themselves, and the concern is that they would commit suicide if they don't alleviate that. But again, that's disputed whether it helps that at all either.
Now, Janice, what you described there in terms of the arguments in the court sound very similar to the arguments being made in the court of public opinion and the arguments that were made in the legislature. And one would think that the legal arguments are going to be slightly different than the political arguments. What determination is the judge being asked to make? Is the judge just looking at the arguments and saying, I agree with you and not you? Or is there a legal question that the judge is going to answer irrespective of how they personally feel about the merits of the science?
That's a great question. Well, what the judge is trying to decide is the constitutionality, and the ACLU in the lawsuit contends that the law should be found unconstitutional on grounds that it's not right to allow somebody who is transgender to not have access to the same medical procedures that are allowed to non-transgender identifying people. So that is the crux of their argument on the constitutionality. There are a couple of other points as well. That seems to be the main one.
So essentially, if I'm understanding what you just said, that other people can have their breasts removed, therefore transgender kids should be able to have their breasts removed. Is that the crux of the argument?
In my understanding of it, yes, that they feel like that it's not right to allow these procedures to be done for other purposes, and it's discriminatory to disallow them for transgender purposes.
Now, as you followed this case, you reported that there were testimonies from detransitioners that were very important as well as potentially moving in this case. What was the role that they were playing in these legal arguments?
Well, of course, it depends on how much weight, if any, the judge will choose to put on that testimony. The two people who testified on behalf of the state of Arkansas had procedures done as adults, but it seemed to be an attempt to show the judge, look, this is the future that young people might face if they do undergo these procedures. And both of these people testified about round after round of medical complications, continuing regret despite each and every phase they went through to try to change their bodies to fit what they believed was their gender. And ultimately, these people returned to the gender that matches the biological sex that they were born with.
Janice, any sense of which direction the judge is going to go in this case?
I never want to predict in any type of a case how a judge or a jury would decide. That would not be my role. But I will say that the judge definitely has a lot of information to consider, hundreds and thousands of pages of different legal filings, briefs, depositions, testimony, and the final phase is going to be for the judge to see what each side argues in legal briefs that will be filed sometime soon, I believe. There was no timeline set for those briefs to be filed, but because it is before a judge, they didn't do the traditional closing arguments that would be held in most cases. They're going to do that in writing. And so I do think that those briefs will give us a better idea about the legal standards that they want the judge to look at.
Janice Hisle, Epoch Times, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.